Hi everybody. Okay, I'm live. A little bit late. I see some giving out in the chat as usual, so it inspired me to just click go live. So here we are. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. I want to talk about a few bits tonight. I headlined this the Auslander Raus thing, the German phenomenon of people singing this song which is translates to Germany for the Germans, foreigners out. I usually stick to Irish stories, but I found that kind of interesting, and it leads on to some other stuff I might want to talk about to do with Ireland. There are sort of similar things happening in Ireland in a way. A story I left on the table the other night because I ran out of time was just this kind of individual story of an Irish traditional kind of leftist making forays over to talking points more similar to mine, we'll say. And I put that out recently, talking about it, or like mentioned it online. So it caught on a little bit, but some people were saying, "Oh, he's a lefty. There's no point talking to him." I just want to have a little sort of riff on the question of kind of rocking in my chair. I'm not sure why, but a little riff on why not culture wars, but like winning the battle with the insiders and I don't want to say the rich people, I don't want to say the regime affiliated influencers, content creators and all that. I don't strictly mean any of those categories, but that side of things. A lot of people I've seen in Ireland, there's been almost, I don't want to say pitched battles either, but we'll say clashes or disputes with the police outside of these centres. Very local community stuff, very organic. Ireland is the prime example of this. Organic street level stuff. It's amazing in a way that it sort of comes from totally the bottom up. It's just random communities coming out, and then they've got this kind of diffused, asymmetric, decentralized online support network of content creators and anonymous posters and all that. And it's a hugely powerful thing. But I just do believe that this idea of influencing, and I'm not the first person to have ever said this, of course, but the idea of influencing the insider sort of, whether it's musicians or, mainstream TikTokers or you name it, the idea of influencing that and then influencing the middle and upper classes as well. And I say these classes loosely because these class things are a little bit funny, and a little bit overprescribed, but like the working class is what we call it in Ireland. That culture war has been completely won, and I think it's important to look at the other sort of classes and strata of society in so much as they exist, and trying to get in there. And the German story speaks to that a little bit, and I'll get onto the Irish thing as well a bit. Then I would just want to go through some general Irish Twitter stuff. Some people are critical of like streams that, not critical to me, but I've seen it in general online. People saying that almost like the idea that if you stream Twitter content, it's like a low form of content. I actually think it's kind of good. It's a good medium, in my view, for like regular multiple nights a week streaming to cover this stuff and just cover stories that are out there and everybody's seen, but try to come up with a take on them and try to speak to them and expand on it a little bit. That's why I think you're here. That's why I think anyone ever listens for that kind of angle. So I think it's worthwhile. And then I want to, what have I got? A little bit more about Ballyogan in Dublin, this local community protesting against migrant plantation. You know the drill there, but a little bit more on that. I also want to watch the video and speak about this. I don't know if you saw this, but there's a woman from Newtown Mount Kennedy who, like 20 plus years ago, her sister was murdered by an undocumented, unvetted, fake asylum seeker, something like that. And she was living basically across the road from this big, massive center that, the state opened up as almost like a military barracks there. Everybody knows the crack there. But, really, I haven't got much to say on that beyond just watching that video. But it's it's the kind of thing that me, as someone who's advocating a cause, if I was trying to make up a story to strengthen my cause and my point of view, I'd make up something like this. It sounds almost fake. It's so, you couldn't write this, and it's tragic as well, of course. A few more little bits and pieces. Tonight is a bit of a bits and pieces stream. I had like 2,200 viewers the other night. I was doing a Ballyogan recap. I think people love that. It gets big viewers. I won't be getting that tonight. This is just, FYI. It's not that kind of stream. I just want to go. It's all more modular, you know, just little bits and pieces. But I said I'd go live anyway to have a little chinwag with you. And I'm also sick. You probably noticed me sniffling. I hope I'm not heavy breathing in the mic, but that's just where I'm at basically. Feel like shite. So yeah, and as usual, shill the links, the super chats, and the links in the description, and follow me on social media. I feel less enthusiastic about shilling them because I'm not exactly on form tonight, and there's no huge subject. So look, whatever. Just so you're aware, they're there. Yeah. So, but still a bit of talking to be done tonight, I would say. So welcome to the chat. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. And yeah, let's kind of get into it. See how it goes. So, where am I at, lads? Have I done my screenshot? I haven't. Badly prepared. Just give me a minute. It's pissing rain as well, by the way. And I stream from, if you're interested, I stream from this kind of like extension out the back that was built onto this house, and it's got a flat roof and I can hear it. So it's cozy. So Auslander Aus. So most of you have probably seen this if you're online a bit. It's this phrase, German phrase, Auslander Aus, Deutschland in Deutschen, Ausländer aus. It means German for the Germans, foreigners out. And it's gone viral. It originated. It's just a German piece of language, obviously, but as a sort of anthem or a slogan, it came about like at least a decade ago, as far as I'm aware. Pegida, and then moved on to something else. It doesn't belong to anyone. It's just a phrase, and then it's in AFD circles, to the best of my knowledge. And now it's sort of caught on as just this mainstream club trend. And what's interesting about it is that it's not hyper online. You don't have to go to some like identitarian conference or anything like that. It's just in nightclubs, at parties, and all of this. And it's also very catchy. I'm going to play it for you now. It's such a banger. Yeah, it's an absolute banger. Hopefully I don't glitch out here with my shitty equipment. I'm just going to jam here for a bit. I have stuff to say on this, but I'm enjoying it too. Yeah, let me know if give me the old 5x5 if you can hear that and hear me and everything okay. I'm going to play all these videos simply just to hear it. Look at all these German kids. Great. God bless them. There's a quality to the song as well that gives it this very much a song of the people type of thing, because it's this old Euro dance kind of song or whatever, Agostini or something like that from a while back, an old kind of dance tune. But the song itself, the track or the meme that's going around of it, is a bunch of people in a club singing it. So it's the sound. It's almost like a football stadium or something, like a bunch of people singing like in chorus, not like, like almost just chanting it out. And that's the track. And then it plays in nightclubs and everybody sings it in the same fashion. Oh, there we go again. Okay, I don't know where it's coming from now. But and this is the interesting video. But that gives it this certain people's quality, I think, that it's just the sound of a football chant or a club chant being played back, and then people, chanting it back. So it's the people to the people. I love that. But this is the one that has sparked recent interest, online interest today. This chick. Okay, there's another guy here makes some gestures which I don't know how YouTube is good or not. I can't turn it off, lads. I'm muting it on my end. I hope it's muted on your end. But so if I'm playing over myself, let me know. But it just it gets me thinking about it a lot because the girl there, for example, it says so much. Like if you're a person who's like familiar with what's his name, was he Czech? Václav Havel. A lot of people read that the greengrocer, the study of tyranny, the study of oppression and regimes and all that. That is something which I have been interested in for a long time since I got into digital politics. So you've seen the videos there. And since I got into digital politics, it's something that like I'm directly involved in it and sort of a victim, you could say, of it, or a subject of it. It's someone says it's still playing. Oh, great, wonderful. Okay, I'll just get rid of that tab. I muted it. I muted that on my end. It was meant to be gone. It wasn't. Sorry, lads. You know me. So what I was saying is that I'm a fan of the study of regimes. So we're in the Western regime now. It oppresses people in certain ways, and that's very interesting. But whether I think I would be interested regardless in studying, you know, other places, China, Russia, historical places, the West in various parts of history, the idea of like how a regime oppresses people beyond just marching out and dragging people out of their houses into a van in the middle of the night, never to be seen again. That's kind of the picture people have of how regime tyranny operates. And yet, as you're subjected to it in the West, you start to become all too familiar with the fact that it can be that, and often is that, but it's the real nature of it is much more complicated. The way it's psychological, it's spiritual, it's sociological, it's all of that going on, and it's sort of fascinating. So I like to see what's happening in the West under those auspices. And what you see with this Auslander Raus thing is that happening sort of in real time in front of you. This is a people's chant. It is warranted given everything that's happened in Germany in the last 50 years, especially in the last 10 years. And it's young people singing this tune, which half of them kind of agree. It is catching on, but also it's just a bit of fun. And yet you have with this girl in that video, she's pictured in that video singing the words for all of about 2 seconds. And she's smiling and she's happy and she's kind of good looking. And what they've done now is plaster her face and name all over the newspapers and loads of other people singing it. Anyone in any one of these clubs singing the song, having a good time, is now doxxed, fired. Because I don't speak German, I can't get the details straight on this, but it seems like the state are either coming after them or getting ready to prosecute them. There's many situations like this. Germany is the prime example of it, where the repression is I'd say it's most extreme, along maybe with Britain, maybe the most extreme, perhaps more than, you can talk about North Korea and all that, but how much of that is, we don't really know what it's like actually over there. Certainly, I'd say more than China and Russia. My belief is that Germany or Britain are more totalitarian and more interfering in the social and psychological dynamics of its people and crushing dissent via doxing, arrest, firing, conditioning, the whole lot. Far more down that track than any China or Russia, I would believe, are Germany and Britain. It's unclear which one is worse, but with Germany, especially because of World War II, the whole sort of unrooting of their entire history, turning it against them, and the laws. One of the things that struck me about Germany, because let you in on a little bit of my life. I had the same Berlin phase, just like David Bowie and every other hipster knobhead you've ever heard of, type of thing. It just happened to be the case that when I was 19, 20, I just happened to pick Berlin as like, I'm going to go there for a summer. So I did that, had a great time, loved it, found it very interesting. And then I went back there with my wife more recently. So Berlin's a bit of a spot for me in particular. And when I was most recently there, I was at, I've forgotten the name of it, some attraction location in Berlin. And what I found mad, you've probably heard of this one. It's something, I don't know where it is, but it's a glass square in the ground in some like plaza type place. There's a glass square, and if you look through it, there's this kind of library or something, and it's got books in it, and it's something to do. The point of this exhibit is to talk about burnt books in Germany and how the Nazis were so oppressive and totalitarian. And of course, Germany is one of the most censorious places on earth. You know, you can the amount of people who have their doors kicked in for saying stuff like Germany for the Germans or whatever it is. Ursula Haverback, a 90-year-old woman, getting repeatedly thrown in jail because she has a different view of World War II and all that. This is a 90-year-old woman. She's not beating anyone up. She's not imprisoning anyone. She's not doing anything to anyone. She just has a different view of her own country's history, disputes certain things. And they repeatedly throw her in jail, and she comes out and she is just staunch, and she says the same thing again when she comes out, and they put her back in jail over and over again. Now, I expect that in China, if a little old lady insisted on saying that the Tiananmen Square massacre was terrible and it renders the Chinese government illegitimate, I imagine if she was saying that on Weibo, and if they banned her from Weibo, she just, stood around some street with a little sign or whatever, I imagine they would just overlook it. They would just say, it's just some little old lady. It's not going to, come on. It's not going to, it's not going to be the make or break, right? It's just one little old lady. She's like 90. And morally speaking, it's just an old lady. Come on, guys. We're not dealing with a crowd of 5,000 men banging on the door of the parliament or something. But no, in Germany, they are that cruel and that vindictive and that totalitarian that they do stuff like this. And some young girl, what is she? Probably 20, barely 20 anything. And she's just singing a song. And they're trying to destroy her life and everybody else's. But some of the point I wanted to make on this is that you could go on any night in the last 10 years and talk about the cancel mob and the totalitarian regime. My feeling on it tonight, having seen all this, is that it is starting to crack. Cancel culture. I'm not talking about cancel culture and the woke mob. That's kind of a silly terminology. I mean the diktats, the cultural and political diktats of the regimes or / regime that runs the West, Europe, North America, Oceania. Those diktats, that sort of ideology, I think it is starting to really crack now. When you see, I think it's called Sylt, somewhere like that in Germany. It's like a island somewhere that's where kids go, perhaps posh kids go to have like their parties and stuff like that at a certain time of year or something. I don't know Germany very well, but in that video with the girl, they have like jumpers, sweaters tied around their shoulders, and they look like preppy, really posh. The girl who's since been fired from her job for her, singing the song, she was a assistant to a social media influencer. So all of these people would be effectively yuppies, like serious yuppies, probably from very rich and influential families. And that's the fascinating thing about this. This is what makes this interesting as opposed to any other circumstance, is that it's the rich. The rich are out there singing a song like this, and it's a kind of a party song, and yet they still know what they're singing. They still know the words. They're still attracted to the dark energy of it, the sort of the taboo of it and all that. So that's what makes it fun, but also they have to kind of agree with it. If they thought, oh, it's fun, but it is a terrible thing, like if it was something about harming children or whatever, that wouldn't be a funny song. It couldn't be a funny song because that's not funny. Whereas with this, there has to be, at the very least, all these yuppies have to kind of agree with the words of the song, on top of it just being a bit of fun. And bear in mind that the words of the song are not, we need to check passports better at the airport. We need to reduce the numbers. We need a what is it called again? A points-based Australian system. Those aren't the words of the song. The words of the song are Germany for the Germans, foreigners out. I mean, doesn't get any more like blunt than that, really. And it just reminds me of the energy in Ireland. Like if you go to, and this is why it piqued my interest, is that I'm Irish and I'm involved in the Irish pushback against this stuff very closely. And what I see in Ireland is this not strictly, but largely working class grassroots thing where the people in the middle and the upper classes might parse their arguments a bit more discreetly and they're more tame about it all. Whereas if you go to a protest in Coolock, they just say, just get them out. They'll say stuff like, just get them out. There's too many foreigners here. We don't want them, stuff like that. Just straightforward, unvarnished language. There's just and it's ultimately it's the closest to reality language. It's just straightforward. But that's why, from my perspective, to see it in Germany, where and think of Germans, right? Germans to begin with are sort of, very upstanding. That's the meme about them. They're very, good work ethic. They save. They have temperance and all of that. So they're like that as a culture to begin with, and then just to take the rich ones of even them, the rich, connected, elite members of that, singing this song that sounds like something you would hear at some fella on a horse riding by you in this Dublin city or in Ballymun, right? Some like 16-year-old on a horse. So that's sort of, you can see now from my perspective how that's interesting. Like, that's in Germany. I thought Irish fellas in Ballymun on a horse were the only people with serious balls to just come out with it. But no, you have yuppies now in Germany. Those are far-flung types of people from each other. And you have people, the German types, the ski people, the people who go skiing and they're like DJs and they have their jackets and the sunglasses and it just looks like something from almost like a fraternity, like an American fraternity of like white boys, that kind of thing. It's quite something to see that. And it just gets me thinking about this phenomenon in the West of, is the culture cracking? You see, same with in the United States, across in the right-wing Republican sort of conservative movement, you have Nick Fuentes. And it's funny because he's like this kind of lightning rod figure. There's some people out there who have their daggers drawn, don't like him. Some people love him. A lot of people love him. But just regardless of that, just in terms of the chat, some of you will be like, I don't like him. Some of you will be big fans. Whatever. Just regardless, someone like him and his movement are sort of completely taking over the right-wing base in the United States and the youth culture of that, with the Israel stuff, with the taboo subjects becoming normalized by the rate is basically exponential on how the taboo stuff is becoming normalized, and more people can start expressing it, and it's just like I say, it just becomes normal with every passing year. And just to take the Israel subject for example, over time, they can't ignore that. That has to build on them, and then it has political ramifications where it actually affects the geopolitical situation of America and Israel, and it affects the policy, the immigration policy, the anti-white policies in America. If it becomes completely normalized among a huge swathe of the population and it's not taboo anymore, then the policy just becomes more and more apparently totalitarian. It's not connected to any grassroots desire for it, even among, take the anti-white policies, even among a certain proportion of non-whites. So you start to see the regime's machinations for what they are. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it's the same in Germany and in Ireland, and that's kind of what I want to get to a little bit more here. I'll pull up the screen again. yeah, there's a few different angles on this I kind of want to get into. So what did I have here? Oh yeah, so this is just by the by. This was going around the place for ages. So in just to return to the Germany subject directly, you'll have people being rounded up, doors being kicked in by German police, people being cancelled and fired from their jobs and the rest of it for saying Germany for the Germans, foreigners out. And has been pointed out by the likes of Martin Sellner and others, you have Islamists and Turkish nationalists and the rest of it in Germany in their millions, actually, uh, shouting about, we're taking over this, that, and the other. And, not a whisper is made about that by the state. No one's fired. Nobody says Ahmed Mohammed said this. It's like he's invisible. He could say what he wants. He could say the most outlandishly tribalistic and derogatory things about being nationalistic or colonial and tribal and just trying to take over and derogatory towards the German nation state, diverse as it is, disregarding the idea of friendly liberal pluralism and saying, no, we're here to take over, that kind of hard-nosed kind of stuff. And he might as well be invisible. No one necessarily cares within the regime of Germany. And I'll just show you this video in Ireland. So if you say, get them out, we're being taken over in Ireland, we're being replaced, we don't want to be replaced, we're pushing back, that's a big offense as well, apparently, right? So if you work in some good job or if you're a big mainstream social media influencer, you're going to get cancelled hard for that. But then this guy who is like, he calls himself Black Paddy, he's been in Ireland for a while, so he's got a bit of an Irish accent. He's a bit of a meme where it's like, oh, look, I'm black, but I being funny and talking about Irish stuff. He said this on mainstream television.
It's a new Ireland. It is, though. It is the new Ireland. It's the new Ireland of new, different diversities, multicultural people, Filipinos, Spanish, Africans, mixed people. I met the girl the other day, and I was like, "Where you from?" She goes, "My man's from China, and my dad is from Africa." I'm like, "Whoa, Ireland is unique now. We're mixed." Because I can imagine in 10 years' time, there's going to be Barack Obamas walking around, Beyonce's, and different sorts, mixture of people. So the whites are going extinct here now. So we're taking over.
Right. So that's a knee slapper, and Hector across from him, the Irish dope, laughs along with it. We're taking over. So like the whites are going extinct. We're taking over. And someone might say, "Oh, like you're being petty, pointing at the inconsistencies. We know what they are." But I'll do it regardless. The whites are going extinct. We're taking over as a result, ultimately, of state policy, which no one in Ireland wants. That is sort of, what's the word for it? Like if they want to say that, to say Germany for the Germans, foreigners out, is there's a kind of blood curdling, nasty, hostile, overly tribalistic, cruel towards others tone to that, and that's what that implies. Well, if that is the case, then this is the same, right? And to say we're taking over and you're going extinct, and it's a joke. Not cancelled, obviously, stating the obvious, but the thing is that for nationalists in the West, who hitherto have been sort of siloed away into internet circles and radical circles, the time now is perfect. It is coming of age where it is due for mainstream acceptance. It's banging on the door. It's kicking in the door. And I do think the regimes in the West / regime are sort of swaying. If you saw Usyk and Fury the other night, when Usyk had him on the ropes, they are wobbling around the place, and we are coming at them, and it's jab after jab. And it's a fascinating time in that sense, and it's worth sort of trying to think about, where are we actually at, and what's going on right now? What happens in a year's time? Where have we come from since a year or two ago? So zoom out 10 years, zoom out 20 years, whatever. Try to get an idea of what this current moment actually implies. And, there's a lot there. Like, so your man talking about Irish people are going extinct, ha ha ha. The obvious pushback to that, beyond just niche nationalist radical online circles, the answer among the diminishing and increasingly marginalized, discriminated against, and often impoverished native people in their respective countries, be it Germany, Ireland, or the US, the response is going to be, because it's all fine when you're okay, you're still 95% of the population, but as it gets worse, as you get poorer, as you become more of a minority, as you're increasingly, like, your kid is even more of a minority in their school because the numbers are heightened, etc. You know, what were until recently normal people not interested in that kind of thing are going to look around and say, well, if he can talk about the whites are going extinct, we're taking over, then why can't I say X country for X people, get them out, or foreigners out? It's what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I've said this before, that you could have, like, for better or for worse, you could have a state like Singapore under Lee Kuan Yew, where sectarianism was strictly forbidden. Everyone is forcibly mixed together, and this kind of tribalistic politics is completely expunged from political discourse. It's outlawed top down, and everything is genuinely, probably the closest example ever historically to like a technocratic equalitarian state, um, or an equalitarian technocracy, whatever. You get what I'm talking about. That'd be one thing, but that's obviously not what we have in the West. It's not what we're going to have. So people are going to look at it. Even rich Germans on their like ski holiday or whatever it is, they're going to say, listen, like, if I go into the capital of my city where I used to go shopping, like, they might be from very rich families, so they go shopping and they enjoy the nice things of their country, and they're used to being in the part of that upper class. But even they will say, look, the main cities that I would like to go to, and even these villages now with these migrant plantations from like 10 buses being brought into a town, no matter where you go now, whether you're rich or poor or anything else, we can all see what's going on here. And then we all turn on the TV and hear what's being said and the discriminatory nature of the whole thing. I'm just seeing DMs coming in there, and I'm worried there's something wrong here and someone's trying to let me know. I assume it's all good. But I mean, I had some Martin Sellner posts here as well. But I'll just give you what he said here. Don't underestimate what's happening in Germany right now. Despite massive repression and penalties, the system is not managing to keep the forbidden song down. Normal Germans are singing it. Rich party people in a posh club in Silt. Poor East German boys in the village disco. So it's across the board. And there's just another point. This kind of all bleeds together. So let me see how it goes. So there's this thing I've been thinking about, which is like the idea of I'm going to call it like the inequality bind, or the equality bind. Now, there are some nationalists, some person says, what's the name of the song? It's called Them Raus. I don't really say that in a German accent because I'm not German, but I mean, I can play it again if we want to, like, but yeah, it's this whole thing of they call it the equality bind, and I think it's a thread worth pulling at, especially in Ireland, because things are so heightened and our history lends itself that way, which is, like I said, the difference between a guy saying whites will go extinct, that's fine, and we're taking over, that's fine. But if you say foreigners out, that's like end of your life, terrible, apparently. Even though like a lot of people on the quiet sort of think, well, do you know what? I kind of agree. There's more to it as well. There's this thing recently in Ireland, I mentioned again lately, but I'll say it again, which is they're talking about reviewing the means test for asylum seekers, so-called fake migrant opportunist economic migrants. They're talking about like introducing a means test for their weekly payment, which is whatever, 200 or something like that. But that's on top of their, and you might think I'm repeating myself, but it's, I say this all the time, I'm getting to something. They have that payment every week, unmeans tested. They also have their heating, their needs, their food, the whole lot kind of is taken care of generally for them. And they still get this payment without a means test. So in theory, this isn't always the case, but just in theory, that person could be getting that money per week. They could be getting their medical card, their dental, their heating, the whole lot, bills. And that person could be, in theory, driving a Ferrari and have money pissing out of their bank account, right? Like through the seams, because they've so much of it. That could, in theory, be true. In many cases, it might not be a Ferrari. It might be a Ukrainian Porsche Cayenne. Everybody sees the likes of them and BMWs and all that around the place. And it's sort of like that's actually an extreme situation. I was thinking, an Irish person who's €1 over the Scaldy middle class limit or squeeze middle limit gets none of those things. And because prices have gone up, instead of the government determined those rates years ago, and they haven't properly adjusted them for inflation. So if you're €1 over the limits and you have to take care of your own dental, your own everything, your own heating, the whole lot, and you're working, and yet it's barely affordable, if at all, and you have to choose between food and heating or eating, as they say, you're looking across at that hypothetical Ferrari or realistically a Porsche Cayenne driver who is getting literally everything for free. And I've said all this before, but I'll say it again. They're getting all that for free. And not only, this is the analogy I like to give, not only do they get their heating for free, let's say, if they're staying in a modular home place or a hotel or some sort of housing unit type thing, not only do they get those, I'm just checking the chat to see if everything's all right. Yeah, not only do they get those things for free, but it's way worse than that, because it's a form, and it's not just UBI, which would be something like that'd be outlandish anyway, but it's a babysitting type of thing. I'm still trying to come up with a word for it, because take the heating example. So it's not just that they don't have to pay for it. They don't have to call the kerosene oil guy and say, hey, can you come over Thursday? I'll be there at 10. Or 10 doesn't work. Actually, sorry, 10 doesn't work for me. Can we move it to 12? Oh, that doesn't work for you. Okay, we'll do it the next day. Just the adult stuff that you have to do to maintain your life, right? And then when the guy comes over, you let him in, he fills it up, then the whopper of a bill comes at you. But so not only do you have to pay the bill, but you have to take care of the invoice and ring up the person on the phone and get it paid. La, 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 la. And you have to check your accounts to move the money over the right way and everything. These guys don't have to even do any of that. It just shows up and they enjoy the heat. And while I don't have the exact details on this, I assume it's not really rationed. So if they decide, if it's slightly cold, they say, I'm kind of cold, press the on button, right? Whereas your average person, especially these days in Ireland or across the West, especially in Europe, has to, like, even if you're kind of reasonably well off, everyone has to ration to some extent. You can't be spending a fortune on these things. So you might wrap up and all that. Says me in this jacket here. It's not even cold tonight for me, but anyway, I'm just that type of person. But it's just that's an analogy for the rest of it. And my point is, that person who's on this, not just UBI, but some sort of babysitting, extreme pampering thing, there's no criteria upon which you have to be an asylum seeker. Basically anything, and in practical terms, it's not, there are no grounds, just as long as you're not native to that country. Ideally, if you're not native to Europe. So that's the only grounds. And then that same person who is in receipt of this babysitting UBI, whatever you call it, in theory could rock up to his accommodation every day in a Ferrari Enzo or whatever, Lamborghini. And there is no, they're talking about introducing a means test, but as of now, they could do that and they wouldn't have to hide the Lamborghini. They wouldn't have to do anything. And they're whatever, Gucci clothes, they wouldn't have to hide it because there's no law being broken. They are fine. That's the law of the land. That's how it works. And yet, if you're €1 over this terribly strict limit on assistance, you don't get any of that. No medical card, no anything. So you might say, okay, you're bringing that point up again, like, why are you just saying the same stuff? Is because I'm getting at this idea of the equality bind in the West. So all sort of insurgent identitarian movements, whether it's Catholics in the north of Ireland, or whether it's Black South Africans in South Africa or in the US in the mid 20th century, etc., regardless of where you stand on any of those particulars, they do always pull on that thread of we are being treated unequally. And if you look at something like the apartheid, Jim Crow, even in the north with the Catholics, they're not going to shy away from how unequal it is. If anything, they're going to play it up and zoom in on any little hint of systematic inequality and discrimination against them, and they're going to blow that up and magnify it to high heaven. And so I just think it's important for people in the West, in Ireland and across the West, to sort of not shy away from that. it's very important, and it's very stark as well. I was actually looking, well, I'm not that historically literate about all sorts of subjects, but I was thinking about something like Jim Crow and apartheid, which are the famous things were raised on Hollywood movies and all of that as like the archetypical systematic inequality oppression. But like if you said to if you like think if you describe the Irish scenario, so the difference between an asylum seeker or some sort of migrant who's pretending to be an asylum seeker and an average squeezed middle Irish person, that thing I just described there, if you said that that was the case during Jim Crow or apartheid, someone would be within their rights to almost say, "Are you sure? Are you sure it was like I know it was bad. I know they had separate but equal, but they said it was separate but equal in the American South in like 1940, 30s, 40s. They said that that was the court ruling on it, but we all know that it was applied a little bit unequally, and there are many cases where the NAACP sort of honed in on like where, even though on paper it was meant to be separate but equal, but in reality it played out slightly different. Whereas, and I'm not trying to do a direct compare and contrast, but I'm just saying, if you said that, oh well, in the American South, it was a case that whites versus blacks, like whites could get basically, so long as they weren't black, that was the only real discernible difference in characteristic if you actually drill down on it. It was a case that they got free heating. They didn't even have to do it. They were just children of the state, luxuriant children of the state, who just had no responsibilities, no shortage, no lack of anything. They were completely catered for, a universal basic care, something like that. And that was the case for the whites, but the blacks just had none of that. And even if the white person was driving a Ferrari or some really good car and was really rich, they would still get all of that. And the black person who was piss poor wouldn't get any of that. And they tried to say that it was separate but equal. But clearly, if you look at those cases, it's not just where you're able to diagnose a bit of equality. Like if you look closely, you can see a sort of inequality emerging in effect. So on paper, it was meant to be equal, but you could see the effect was different. Whereas in this Irish scenario that I'm talking about, it's on paper. Like this is on paper. This is law. This is how it works. And nobody disputes that. I wouldn't go up to a minister like Al Sharpton trying to claim, oh, we can all see the inequality, the latent racism or something. No, it's if I put the situation as I've described to them, no politician, no journalist would deny that that is how it works. And so, it's something that should be noted. The same is true for NGO representation. So you can have a Roma Gypsy group, you can have a Black Lives Matter group, state funded by all these places. And yet if you were to say, okay, look, I'll buy into the globalized, multicultural, diverse Irish state, fair enough, right? I'll buy into it. They have their group. They shouldn't be discriminated against. They're welcome. Let's say you grant all that. And then you just say, okay, well, let's join the party. You have a Roma Gypsy group here and a Africans group here. And they have diverging interests. They're different. They look after, they're there to represent their groups. And yet it's not seen as, one isn't seen as at the exclusion of the other. So if that's the framework, well, then let us have our Irish advocacy group, and we can tussle around on the social and political scene and advocate for our interest and address grievances. And that shouldn't affect anyone else. Same way apparently the Romas don't affect the Africans, and the Africans don't affect the Hindu representation group and all that. So like, why can't we even have one? If we have one, not only is it not funded by the state, but it's hounded, prosecuted, and persecuted by the state and its proxies. That's a basic thing that most of you obviously are fully aware of, and yet it can't be said enough. And some people say, oh, that's pleading, that you're pleading you're sort of like, looking for a buy-in to this thing. It's not. It's just a way of advancing your interests. Like, everyone knows where I stand, but It's important. And when I look at this German thing, it's like, I think that's the ethos that might be going around, where all classes of Germans now are seeing that they're minorities in their cities, and without even thinking about it too much, they're starting to become tribal. They're starting to return to nature, return to tradition. And tradition is to be tribal. Tradition is to have your songs. Even, this kill the Boer chant, Julius Malema in South Africa, you might not like that. You might be like a Western identitarian. You might not like it. But at the end of the day, they are the majority in that country, have been for a long time. They have their point of view. They have their grievance, even if the whole place is being stripped down and destroyed. From their point of view, that's their identity and that's their historical grievance. And it's sort of a chant that they do. To take it close at home, even in the north of Ireland, with these videos that come out of these loyalists sometimes singing some song that's derogatory towards like Irish Catholics, and in under the new like modern Clintonian kind of Good Friday Agreement equality state, they get doxxed and sort of harassed, largely by Irish people who are pissed off about it, but they also like will get fired from jobs and stuff. And you see the same with in the south, or even in the north, anywhere where a football team sings something like Up the Ra, now they're getting fired for it. Whereas when I grew up in school, we would be on the way back from a football match and we'd be singing The Fields of Athen Rye with the IRA chant, and it was all good. And it was fun. It was just fun. It was just part of our identity. And I can actually remember being in about midway through secondary school, maybe fourth year or something. And so whatever year that was in secondary school. And I remember when we would sing it, we had dreams and songs to sing, IRA. When that bit would come up and it would, songs to sing, and that gap would come in for the Ra chant, the teachers were starting to look at us and be like, wag their fingers at us. I remember that coming in. I don't know how and why that came in, but it was just some cultural political thing from top down, where it became it was like, oh, well, that's racist or something. You can't sing that. And it's just like, regardless of the identity or the point of view of the tribe who are singing their song, tribes have their songs, they have their grievances, they have their illegitimate and legitimate grievances, and these songs are part of it. It's almost like a folk thing, and I think when the chips are down and when the rubber meets the road, it's one of those signals for a sort of return to some sort of natural order, where people start to have their songs. And given the oppression that's going on in Germany, to see even wealthy people of all classes in Germany sing their sort of tribal song, even if it's a dance tune and even if it's a bit of fun, it's still one of those type of things where you're saying, fuck that, I'm singing the song, it's funny, it brings us together, it makes us feel like we're people again. To see a song like that thriving in Germany, despite the, extremely totalitarian system above them, shows the power of rising nationalism and the return to tribalism and identity across the West under these sort of harsh circumstances of effectively invasion. That's a massive, massive thing. So, that's why I made that a feature, a story to talk about tonight. You're seeing it all over the place. And this just kind of brings me into the next story, which is something I meant to speak about the previous night, but I didn't. I'm going to play it. So I'll tell you, it relates. This is kind of a segue. So for those, I'll big it up here. So I'll just give you my Twitter sort of blurb on this first to give it an explanation. So it's this guy who traditionally, he makes TikToks. He's like a history. He's got like a master's in history or whatever. He's educated on like Irish history. He knows his stuff. He's a smart guy. And I saw his stuff over the years on TikTok, and he was like a lefty, like a libtard, we'll say. That, or like at least it seemed that way to me. He'd criticize the so-called far right, he'd criticize this and that and the other, make these kind of points that I thought were a little bit silly, let's say. But at the same time, when I did see this guy pop up, I would always think, well, he's obviously intelligent. This is an intelligent person who is thinking. And insofar as he's making a critique of right-wingers, conservatives, nationalists, insofar as he's making a critique, insofar as that critique could at all be good, it's as good as it could be. You know what I mean? He's giving it the most intelligent treatment possible, although I think he's very wrong on some issues. But also historically literate, smart, puts together good content. And then I was surprised to recently, kind of having not come across this guy in a while, see this video pop up somewhere. Someone actually who texted it me and let me know. They were like, "Have you?" Because they know what I do. They said, "Oh, you might find this interesting. There's this guy who's sort of a lefty, and he's granting a lot of the premises of someone like the likes of what I would say, albeit from this trying to stay on this lefty track." And I just thought, yeah, this guy probably has, I don't know what, 30,000 followers on TikTok, something like that. But regardless of his follower count, he's on the scene. You know, a lot of people who are using TikTok in Ireland they'd recognize the face. So he's sort of like, in a minor but important way, a sort of a part of the mainstreamish online content creator world universe, like the Marvel universe. If you think of someone like, if you're Irish, you'll know these reference points, but someone like Garen, I don't know if you're familiar with him. Garen, he does funny videos on TikTok. He is really funny. But he's not political, he's apolitical, kind of, he just does funny cultural observations, commentary, jokes. It's good crack. Someone like him, or, you know, there's loads like that you just see them around TikTok, regardless of their scale or popularity numbers wise. They're just one of those crew. So to see someone he's in the house, so to speak, he's not banned off TikTok, he's not cancelled, he's right on, he's traditionally would be pro Sinn Féin and pro this and pro all the right things, you know, that kind of way, all the right on, you know, acceptable things. To see someone like that wander a bit is very significant. And sorry, someone says, can I play the audio? Yeah, I will. I'm just setting it up, you know. So what I said just is, left and right is divisive and incoherent. I believe that. Left, you're left, I'm right. Not to sound trite, but I don't really, like, you get called far right and all that, so you can almost buy into it. But I temperamentally, like, what we call left, I would be far more that way. And that's not me trying to be edgy or different or hot take, but someone says play the vid again. Wait for it, lads. Jesus. It's it'll be better. I'm building it up, you know. So basically my point is, those terms are just divisive, incoherent, and past their like sell by date. I said far right is a blacklist term to create a cordon sanitaire around dissenters. I'm glad to see a lefty, so-called, getting to grips with this. Irish millennials and Zoomers owe it to ourselves to throw off the shackles and start talking. That's all I want. I say it often here. I just want all these Zoomers, millennials, people with a real, like, live, active stake in how this country is going to shit. Can we just talk? Like, can we have certain disagreements and then just see what we agree on and have conversations? Because then we can actually push back against the power structures above us. That's all I want, and I never, ever, ever, ever see it. That's why something as tame as what you're seeing here is significant. Now I will finally play it.
Leftism that have a go at me. I understand. Here's the real issue. Here's the real issues. You're not Irish. The real issues are that people can't book a GP appointment. There's not enough places in the schools. There's not enough public infrastructure. You have situations where small disadvantaged towns, all of a sudden the government has money to do up a derelict hotel on the edge of town that will only benefit a very small number of people who aren't connected to the town, and they're putting in foreign people, right? This is driving the Irish public bananas. And then when people go and protest at these events, the mainstream Irish media calls them far-right fascists. Social media activists call them far-right fascists, right? And I can make this video, and none of those people will see it. They'll only see the videos where they see me being a sort of radical leftist, and they'll have a go at me. I understand there's a real problem. Here's the real issues. Okay, you're not Irish. The real issues are...
And there's another one which shows that it's this isn't just a one-off where he kind of had this notion. It's on the brain, right? So here's one from a few weeks ago. If you remember, the Irish Lib regime media tried to say that the entire Newtown Mount Kennedy pushback in Ireland and everything related to it was some sort of American Twitter hologram psyop, right? Where the majority of people who posted hashtags like Ireland is full and Newtown Mount Kennedy, the majority were American. But of course, if you came in and did, first off, the internet works by sharing things across countries. There's no like national boundaries to the internet. And there's like probably nearly 350 million Americans. There's like tens of millions of Irish descendant Americans. And so if you did a per capita split, just the obvious per capita thing, it turned out that like per capita, the vast majority were in Ireland. All it took was, if for every Irish person who mentioned Newtown Mount Kennedy online, or if for every 30 Irish people who mentioned Newtown Mount Kennedy online, if just one American mentioned it per those 30, then that would, on a absolute scale, be more Americans than Irish mentioned it. You know, the obvious fact, right? But they tried to turn it into this like propaganda. And this guy obviously picked up, because he's intelligent, obviously, and picked up on that, deconstructed it, kind of talked about the bullshit of like how the regime narrative kind of goes.
Stick. But no, really, I want to talk about Ireland for the Irish. Irish lives matter. Those hashtags, right? That hopefully we all know have been stimulated by traffic from outside of Ireland. But that is being used as a kind of a cope mechanism for Irish centrism and for Irish leftism of all types. We don't really have a problem with right-wing nationalism in Ireland because it's all of the hashtags connected to it are being stimulated by overseas traffic. There's a few reasons why that cope just doesn't work. First, being per head capita. You know, Ireland only has 5 million people. You have to consider the ratio of those comments, of those hashtags and how viral they are versus the size of the country. And then the second thing is that we hear the media constantly referring to these protests as far right. We see social media activists referring to them as far right. The truth is, if you were to sit most of the people who show up at these protests, they're just normal working class Irish people who are freaked out about immigration. They don't have right-wing beliefs aside from fear of foreigners, right? In every other way, they're just run-of-the-mill centrists, left, centre-right, whatever they are. If we alienate them and constantly call them far-right, we're basically gaslighting them into being far-right. Do you understand? It's not good to alienate them. We should be sort of bringing them back into the fold. Instead, we're allowing them to be fodder for the stimulation of right-wing nationalism that appears to be coming from overseas. Is it the UK? Is it the US? Is it Russia trying to destabilize the political union of Europe? Well, that the best way to do that is to stimulate regional nationalism. Regional nationalism is a very low-hanging fruit for foreign entities to destabilize countries and powerful political blocs. So that would be the motivation behind it. But we're not dealing with the problem then. To deal with the problem, you need to not alienate the people by calling them far right, and not alienate the people by telling them they don't have a mind for themselves and they can be manipulated by hashtags.
So yeah, very reasonable, right? And there's so much to say on it. First off, even me talking about this now, it's going to be NGO agents kind of like documenting this. Watch, it's hilarious that these people are paid to do this, but they are. They'll be documenting this and using it against him. The fact that I'm basically boosting it and sort of agreeing with him, they'll use that as some sort of cudgel around his neck, but that's no reason for me not to talk about it. That's not my fault. Excuse me. The other thing is, I wish I had TikTok. All respect to the guy, but I've been banned off it basically for no reason multiple times. TikTok is such a good medium. I wish I had it to make little 1-2 minute videos. It's such a good one, and they go viral like wildfire. And the time is right for it, but I'm not allowed on. So this guy will do. He's doing a good job of talking about it from a left-wing perspective. What else is there on this guy? You know, I do disagree on certain things, you know, so there's this kind of thing of like, if a leftist dipping their toe in the water is a brave act, and I welcome it, and I don't mean to be critical, but there's this funny thing where it's like they'll grant that the far right narrative is bullshit. Most people have legitimate grievances against immigration. He's listed them out, and that they're not some sort of demons or whatever. He'll grant all that, and he'll himself, from his own point of view, say that immigration does have a big negative effect on the country in certain ways. But he'll still sort of maintain that, well, there is really a far right, though. There is a far right that can be pointed to all the same. You know, like the media are calling out, the media are over egging the pudding, but still kind of almost granting the premise that there could be a far right. And the real red pill for people to swallow ultimately is that there is, in a sense, no far right. You know, like there might be antisocial personalities, there might be sort of extremists. There are extremists from every fact. There are extremists who believe in flat earth and this and that. There are people who are just weirdos. There are people who are just murderous. They're lunatics, whatever. But on the grand scheme of things, when your man says that the media is gaslighting this anti-immigration movement and this right-wing nationalist movement as like far right, that actually, his point extends all the way out to the end of the line. In my belief, that, well, yeah, if you apply that logic in general, then it does extend all the way out. Like, there is no monster under the bed necessarily that has some nefarious, what is it, a World War II sort of base narrative. They want to do something extreme to lots of people or some sort of cartoonish thing like that. That's just ridiculous, you know. Like, you know, the whole far right narrative that there's some boogeyman just needs to be totally dispensed with. And I think the differences with what he's saying and what I'm saying, obviously he would have to have a different point of view for maybe political self-preservational reasons. I don't know, but I obviously don't know this guy at all. I can't read his mind. But, you know, the only difference between a so-called leftist who's granting a lot of the premise but has to kind of keep the powder dry a bit, and someone like me, or someone who's even more like gloves off than I am, the likes Mick O'Keefe's a great example, like more unvarnished, straight up. Really, the only difference is political control, I would say. You know, the expediency and the understanding of the powers that be, and the inability to just say things kind of like they are and observe it for what it is. Because if you were to just have an unbridled discussion with a person like this, and I was able to interrogate his views openly and say, okay, I agree with most of what you're saying, but can I pull a thread and just see, would you indulge me in that? Can I just see if there is some difference, or if there's some hesitancy you have, then what exactly is it? And then what are you basing that on? And let's debate that. I don't think there's much there. So, you know, again, this is a minor cultural figure, but it's a breaking in the fabric. And you've seen other ones too that have previously been crushed in Ireland. If you're familiar with Gemma Hayes is like if you're familiar with Lisa Hannigan, or if you're not Irish, think of someone like Katie Malua or Nora Jones or something like that, like a very cafe-esque, you know, bougie kind of folk music, female singer type of acoustic guitar, you know, whatever, woolly hat, like cozy vibes, but definitely not like working class, or the very like hipstery, and I don't know, that kind of vibe, right? She was of that kind of class, that kind of milieu, and she came out after Aisling Murphy and tweeted basically that, yeah, if we didn't have like unvetted males, randomers coming into the country willy-nilly, then she wouldn't be dead right now. And she soon after deleted the tweet, sort of apologized, and sort of moved on with her career, and she was spared full cancellation, I suppose, because that's what usually the cancel thing wants you to do. They don't necessarily want your scalp. They first want to give you a chance to bend the knee. They would rather see the knee bent. They would rather see the knee bent and let you hang on to your career in some fashion, than you lose your career but go out swinging and like maintain your, you know, profile and embrace the politics of it further and stuff like that. They would rather the spectacle of someone getting on their knees and kissing the ring, and they enjoy the fact that both the person who's kissing the ring and the onlooking public all know that the person has not changed their views, but they are submitting to power. That's the real, like, for regime people and they're like NGO proxies. That's what they want to see more than anything. So they're not really interested in taking your job. That's a weapon to achieve the flagellation ritual in front of the public for everybody to see. The same happened with John Connors, who went from being a strident, so-called sort of far-right speechmaker, leader, rebel, dissenter from mainstream celebrity in Ireland. He went from that to I'm sorry, I lost my mind. I must have gone crazy, you know, within like 2 days. So they had something on him, I would speculate, and they turned him around. And then he was given a few crumbs of his old career back. Another one was Kelly Harrington, I believe, a boxer in Ireland, young boxer, female. And she came out and said something about a girl who was killed in France by some immigrant. She said that we have to, something to the point of like, we have to stop this, la la la. She was dragged over the coals. She eventually deleted, recanted, and basically what she was offered. Hers was particularly acute because she's an athlete and she's a very well respected social figure. She's a working class girl turned successful boxer. And not only does she box, but she's one of these sort of, I go around to schools people. Like, she's a real community person. She goes to schools around Ireland and does little boxing things with the kids in school, and all the kids line up and sing a song when she comes in, maybe, and she comes with her medals and all that. So that's a real position. Like, that's not, I don't envy her struggle there, because you play a really positive role within the community and within the nation, and you have a lot to offer and a lot of respect, and you're seen as a hero, and you're granted that hero status and everything that comes with it. And then basically what they do is knock on the door and say, what's it going to be, right? Do you want to keep going with saying what you're saying, or do you want to have your lovely little life where it's great, right? These little girls look up to you and everything. We can take all that away like that. And of course, she deleted, recanted, and all the rest, went into hiding, went back to her going to schools with her medals, and you know, understandable. But that's what they lay out in front of you, right? And you know, my view is what needs to happen now, as well as what's going on in Ballyogan and all of this, and the working class stuff, and the organic grassroots online stuff, the whole thing, it's really good. But the next sort of frontal assault, or whatever you want to call it, figuratively speaking, is to start deconstructing and chipping away at this little firewall of, call it cancellation, call it regime power, and try to inspire more people. Like, I just wish that the girl who gets doxxed in Germany, she gets a big GoFundMe, right? Because there's a GoFundMe distributed across 80 million people, and more people beyond Germany could make a fortune without being too much skin off any one donator's nose. So it's not like a big deal. You could do that regularly. Everybody could throw a bit in. It's like circling the wagons. If there's a big GoFundMe for her, she made a fucking fortune. And then she goes online and she says, you know what? I'm going to turn now into a right-wing firebrand a little bit, like a hipster, yuppie, cool new brand. And I'm going to, you know, rub shoulders with Sellner, and he's Austrian, but like, I'm going to just go all in. I'm going to embrace it, actually, because not only is that what I believe, but also that's my only remaining sanctuary. So I'm just going, and it's instead of it being a small sanctuary, which it might have been 5 years ago, it's now a big sanctuary. It's thriving, actually. And so she just goes, okay, that's all that's left for me. Because ultimately, this cancelling and doxing and all this is going to haunt her for life. Like, even if she gets welcomed back in, if she bends the knee and prostrates herself, it'll always haunt her. So that tipping scale where the regime goes too far with it, and the nationalist movement gets big enough that it becomes common sense, almost self-preservational, for a person in that position to go, do you know what, I'm not bending any, that's not really going to get me anywhere anyway. I don't want to live like this. I don't apologize, actually. Fuck you. You know, what's next? Like, that's what I want to happen. And I want to see the same for the Gemma Hayeses and the Kelly Harringtons and all of that in Ireland. I want to see that the ability, the infrastructure, the power structure, whatever it is, I want to see whatever core power that the regime has to put people in this position in key moments. I want to see that degrade and fall apart. And that takes concerted effort. That takes people within these circles being aware of this idea that I'm espousing. It's not like totally original or anything, but just being aware of it, like having it clear in your head and sort of pushing for it. If anyone is on the brink of being cancelled, they get supported. And it's emphasized to them through public and private channels that, listen, this is what you're under here. You have a choice to make, much like the people who work on plantation centers. I've been saying you have a choice to make. Are you going to work there or not? This isn't just like the culture war of 2016. We're in big history here now, and this is serious. So like, you might think about your temporary conveniences, but like, you know, there's an attraction to just saying fuck you now as well. And there's protection, there's a whole lot. So go on, just, do you know what? Make a big decision for the ages and just say, fuck you. I'm not bending my knee. I'm not kissing the ring. Take a hike. And I think that I'm not like that would be ideal in any time or whatever, but I just think now the time is ripe for it, because you have, you know, the nationalist like readout for those people to sort of resort to under that pressure is bigger, and the regime is weaker. This nationalist readout is not just bigger, but it's upper class, it's lower class, middle class, working class, whatever. It's all sorts of people now. So the solidarity is there for that, and I think it's important to go with that. And I hope this TikToker who made this video in Ireland, I hope to see more and more people like that who just say, do you know what, I'm sick of, and think of all the celebrities, all these influencers, right, who are promoted in like sports stars and the rest of it. How many of those people, let's be honest, it probably is like almost all of them, in some form or another, agree with everything I'm more or less saying. Like, in essence, they agree with it. So we come out and we see, what's her name, Imelda May, talk about like, oh, no racism in this country, like racists aren't welcome. You see all of these like these people with this promoted voice, and so you start to think, is that just celebrity culture? Is that what they all believe that? And it's so demoralizing. Like this culture, this milieu that we live under and see, like we're supposed to revere, and we see in the mainstream, they all have this totally detached view than all of us do. And that's actually an illusion. That's why the regime has it in such a way, because the reality is that, no, most of them, just like most probably public order unit guards and most people who are putting up fences around plantation centers, the majority of all these people actually agree with us. And the celebrity thing is more important because it sets the tone, the tone of culture. People take their cues from influencers and celebrities for whatever reason. So if you can see a crack in that facade, it's a big deal. It starts to ripple out in a massive way. For every 10 influencers and celebrities who just say, go on, I'm going to say it, or I'm going to half say it, it has a massive impact. And it gives the regime another fire to put out, figuratively speaking. So that's important. You saw the same. There was a football player in America recently came out with this like staunchly traditional Catholic sort of speech. Again, more and more of that, and circle the wagons around them, left, right, and center. Very important. So someone mentioned Conor McGregor in the chat there. I actually had him noted down on my notepad here that he's actually the big exception. It's such a weapon in the arsenal for Irish nationalism that while you have all these athletes and celebrities being kind of cancelled and destroyed for being nationalist or even mildly nationalist, like Gemma Hayes and Kelly Harrington said very mild things, really. You have someone like Conor McGregor who is 1,000 times the influence of them, distinctly Irish. And not only is he saying what they're saying, but he says things that are 1,000 times more based and straight up than they do. And the beauty of it in Ireland, for those who don't know, is that he's too big to cancel. He's bigger than the Irish court establishment, the press, the influencers, the paid NGOs, the state-funded media and all that. He's actually bigger than those entities put together times 100. So, and he's wealthy, powerful, and connected. So they just can't get him. So he just says what he wants. He says, Ireland, we're at war. The time is coming, like stuff like that. And they can't touch him. So that's a massive thing. Like he's everything I've said about this kind of this war between the people and the regime and the thread of influence and it's in the, speaking of totalitarianism, studies of totalitarianism in the lives of others, which I'm critical of that film, German film. What's it called? I can't remember in German. It's called The Lives of Others, right? It's in East Germany in 1988 or 1989. And one of the stories is that there's this woman who she's a famous actress, but this state apparatchik kind of pulls up in a taxi or pulls up with his driver on the street and says, get in. And she gets in, and he basically expects sexual favors from her. He's kind of obsessed with her, and she goes along with it. And then her career is kept buoyant. She gets all the good roles and all of that. And then at a certain point, she starts to kind of crack, and she doesn't want to do it anymore. She kind of starts rejecting him. And next thing, her like minor drug habit and little indiscretions that she has suddenly get publicized, and her career is destroyed, because she's not playing ball. And that is exactly what it's like in the West, and it's the same in Ireland. It is a patronage system. You have to espouse the right things and do the right things, and then you are on the Late Late Show. You get the deals. You go to all the music fests, and you get a juicy enough check for it, and you get all of that. And if you cross it, you're gone, right? It doesn't matter how talented you are, how popular you are, how much people like you. They decide who's in, who's out. You saw it with Versatile for a while. They tried to get at them. You see it a lot in Ireland. It's just a perennial phenomenon. The celebrity is a very fickle, and there's the rabbit hole goes deep with that. It's not just what you see. Oh, this person is popular, this person isn't. And yet Conor McGregor is this kind of exceptional. He's sort of almost bigger than all that to a certain extent. And he has a lot of free reign and a lot of power to just do what the fuck he wants. So that's kind of good. Anyway, so should I do more? I can talk about more stuff. I just went on with the original subjects quite a lot. But I've more like I can talk and talk, like, yeah, so depending on what you want. I suppose there's always going to be someone who says keep going, but I want to talk about just a little. I mean, okay. So what I'm into here is stating the obvious mode and sort of repeating some stuff I've said before, and you can take that or leave it. So it's kind of just a hard, like, abrupt move from the last subject. There's no segue here. This is just different. And I'll get on to the Newtown Mount Kennedy woman after that. I'll just go quick on this. This is basically my thoughts for the day type of shit. I'm just telling you what I had, the thoughts I had today. So there's a story here from just Irish Media Sunday World today. So it was the short version of it is asylum seeker from Syria 22 accused. This is Ireland. Asylum seeker from Syria 22 accused of biting woman during a predatory attack in Dublin. A Garda told the court Saif Walid al-Hindawi came to Ireland in March by ship in a container with his brother. And it just seeing how everybody's feeling. Yeah, obviously, I'll just put in the plug again, super chats if anybody wants to ask a question, whatever, and the links below as well if you want to support the channel and you don't want to do a super chat, but if you still want to, and you can follow my Rumble, Twitter, Telegram as well. So that was just a brief word from our sponsor, so to speak. So what I was thinking is, like, one of these, I'll read some of the story to you just to give you some of the details. I only read it recently, so I'll just tell you. Basically, it's a woman is getting home from, whether it's work, the pub, whatever she is. She's on her way home, and she's on a poorly lit street, and she feels like she's being followed. She turns around, realizes I'm just distracted here now. Someone says I'm in light mode, so I'm a boomer. Everybody says that. It's like having your steak well done or something. If you're on light mode, it's wrong. It's like liking Nickelback. I don't buy it. Everybody says that. I like it in light mode, is what it is. But yeah, she's on her way home. She's on a dark street, feels like she's being followed, turns around. Yeah, this guy is clearly following her. She starts to speed up, gets on the phone to her husband. She knows what's going on. This guy is totally, like, stalking her down. A poorly lit, quiet area. And he basically pounces on her, gets her on the ground, and starts biting her face. And she eventually kicks him off, kind of gets rid of him. And he bites her face kind of badly enough that she has to go to hospital, get a tetanus shot. She has to get stitches on her lip. So, like, he really, like, this isn't like some sort of, like, ceremonial bite. Like, he bit the woman, like, on her face and held her down. All of that. Terrible. Obviously, like, come on, it doesn't get more like assaulty than that. Someone just follows you, and this is at random, total strangers to each other, right? So there's no rhyme or reason. It's just a random man jumps on you and starts biting your face, a woman's face. So, okay, so someone says it's horror. Light mode is horrible on people's eyes. Okay, I'll change it if it pleases you, like, but I mean, can I do it now? I'm not gonna. I don't want to play around the settings. I'll end up looking into DMs, and I'm not effing with the situation when I'm live. But so I'll do it for next time. My point is, like, we all, like, a lot of you watching this know what I always talk about. You know the crack yourself, but I'll just state it again. And there's another similar story here after, which is that here's what I said today. I said, what would happen if you entered China illegally on a shipping container and then pounced on a random Chinese woman on a dark street, biting her face? It's like a genuine question, you know. I mean, actually, it's a rhetorical question, really. That, like, if I went to China, me as I am in reality, I somehow get on a. Actually, if the bright mode is bothering you, I'll just reduce it, right? I somehow get on a shipping, like a cargo ship. I get into China on the cargo ship. I somehow get through China. I'm there for a while. This guy was like living indigent or something like that. Somehow I get in there. I'm there for a little while. And not just that, but at some point then I follow a Chinese woman down the street. I jump on her and I bite her face. And I get apprehended. And they bring me in. The guy had no passport. So I have no passport. My identity is a bit spurious, obviously, if I have no passport. He also denied it. He said I didn't do it or something. I deny it, and they ask me how I got in here, and they determine, I tell them or whatever that I came in on a shipping container. The reality is that I'll just read you what someone said to me. I said what would happen, and someone put it pretty well here. He said, severe beating, immediate arrest, followed by more severe beatings, followed by a very lengthy prison sentence, maybe torture, then deportation. And I said, best case scenario. It's like, that is what would occur. The best case scenario would be multiple beatings, torture, lengthy, like something like 20 years in prison. And when we're talking prison, we're talking dungeon. And then eventually deportation, which wouldn't have to be this complex Helen McEntee, you know, Rishi Sunak sort of grade thing, like where it's like a complex deportation system through Rwanda, and there's 52 immigration lawyers disputing it, and the EU Court of Human Rights. Like, there would be none of that. They wouldn't have to like tiptoe around how are we going to deport this guy. They would eventually, after all of what he's been put through, they would open the door, put him in the back of a van, take him to a airport basically, and say, get on your flight. After a thorough fingerprinting and photographing and everything else, they would say, you know, you're lucky, we're letting you go. So it's not that we need to figure out your deportation. You're just going to Scarper, obviously, right? This is like the best day of your life, finally getting out from under this. And you're lucky to be alive. And if you come back, you won't be for long if you ever try to return in a shipping container. And by the way, tell all your friends. That's how it would work. And there's a good likelihood that the guy would end up disappeared or dead. I'm not condoning anything and all that, but I'm just saying that's what's likely would happen. And well, I suppose that's kind of I'll read you the other story and then kind of come to my conclusion on that. And again, you all know that these stories are every day, basically. Like, I know Irish people commit crimes too. Obviously, every people commit crimes, but it's we don't have stats on who commits crimes, but we all know these kind of weird crimes where, like, you might have, like, if you were looking at assaults on women, you might find that, yeah, a lot of maybe foreigners are disproportionate in it, but not by like a 90-10 margin. They're disproportionate, but there's still a lot of Irish commit those crimes. If we had the stats available, we might discover something like that. But the reality is some of those might be domestic abuse within the household, which is what it is. It's bad, but it's sort of the familiar thing. You know, it's like, I don't know, you have a fight, it's a fight with some guy you have a beef with at a pub or whatever, you have a little scrap, as opposed to like you get set upon by some random person who jumps out from a bush, you know. Like, clearly there's a sort of some sort of difference there, isn't there? We all intuitively get that. We feel like it's a less safe society if someone jumps out of a bush and beats or rapes someone or kills someone than if a bickering husband and wife or some sort of negative home situation turns nasty, right? We all understand that regardless, we feel more in danger in a society when it's the former, obviously, because you're like, well, I can control or at least be familiar with or understand where my own internal life is at. But it's chaotic if I walk out the front door or my daughter walks out the front door and it's just completely roll of the dice. So those kind of crimes, those kind of totally random, just you're out in society and you expect it to have a certain level of decorum and safety, and next thing, bizarre things like this are happening. That is, as we see anecdotally with all these stories that keep popping up, a major foreign thing, right? Random Indians, random Syrians, whoever, just kind of come in Ireland with no identity. Nobody knows who they are. It's the unvetted males thing. It actually is a real meme. It's like, well, yeah, if you're going to have like an unlimited amount of these reprobates from all over the world with no barrier or filter really on the border, so to speak, well, you're going to end up with a lot of this stuff happening, stating the obvious. But so here's this other story. I'll just read it because you don't like a big screen. It's a Indian gets suspended sentence for putting hand up this is my blurb. Indian gets suspended sentence for putting a hand up a 14-year-old schoolgirl's skirt on a bus. So I'll get into some of the story here. So, I mean, it's the usual, isn't it? So, man who sexually assaulted girl of 14 years old on a bus is given suspended jail sentence. And his name is, so he's obviously Indian, Vimal Karthik Balasubramaniam, 27 years old. So 27-year-old sitting on, sidles up next to a 14-year-old schoolgirl and decides, I mean, the details are in it. It's not really worth reading. I mean, it's kind of salacious and ugly and horrible, but we get the idea. He sat beside the victim and concealed his hand with a bag before rubbing her leg and trying to put his hand up her skirt, the court said. So basically, this is the weirdest stuff ever as well, because it's not even like he just did this all-out jump out of a bush sort of full-on attack type of thing, which would obviously be kind of worse. But it's, in a way, the subtlety of it is more weird, right? Because he goes up and what I can glean from it, is that he sits next to her and sort of puts his bag, so she's in her school uniform. He puts his bag on his kind of lap, maybe kind of over towards her or something like that, and then kind of slides his hand over kind of toward the leg. And this kind of, it sounds like it's something like, oh, my hand is just there, oh, that's just where my hand landed. And then starts to move his hand around and, feel her up and all that kind of stuff. It's like what are you, I'm stating the obvious, but what kind of creep thing is that to do, obviously? But you're not even, what do you think, she doesn't notice or something? What do you think, if you're just quietly perverted, you'll just kind of, and it's a classic, I don't want to name countries or whatever, but let's be real, that's kind of I've heard some stories. I used to know a lot of kind of NGO people in college and stuff like that, and I knew a lot of girls who'd been to India, and they had stories galore along these lines. Stuff very like this. So they're like, oh, I got into a tuk-tuk, and the guy, it's not like some all-out sexual assault. The guy is just, he's just driving the bus, and it's a squeezed in, kind of packed in front seat, and they're next to him. And so he, instead of driving normally, he arcs his elbows out and sort of rubs the side of their chest with his elbow, sort of clearly over the top, it's not just stuck for space, and kind of oh, I'm getting away with it, who knows what I'm doing. What sort of horrible male culture, talk about rape culture and all that, is that? It's a mix of predatory and weak at the same time, which is the worst combination in one sense, of two bad things. But so that's him. So suspended sentence. And just as an aside, he in Sunday World, he had his he was named with an address in West Dublin, which is about 500,000 people, lots of people in West Dublin, probably the most populous part of the country you could think of. And the Irish people who were charged with protesting a plantation centre in Ballyogan, they had their it's I don't know, Oak Avenue, this estate, right down to probably 10, 15 houses, named, pictures, everything. And this guy then who tries to feel up a skirt of a 14-year-old girl on a bus is just West Dublin, while the lads who were charged for the other thing, they were just basically protesting, standing there. That's what they're more or less charged with. And yet what they're protesting in Ballyogan is against the likes of this guy coming into the country. Like the synchronicity between these things and the hypocrisy is unbelievable. But what I wanted to say about it is, like, someone says, "Oh, that's Bob. How are you going? Good lad there, sound man." Saturday, yeah, we should be out in nightclubs or something maybe. But anyway, we're all here. But the thing about, let's say, when I describe China, that if you went to China and you did this, like any of this stuff, feeling girls up on a bus or jumping on some woman on a dark street and biting her face, right? You name it. I'm checking my DMs. I'm just curious what's going on. If you do that in China, and basically you're either going to end up disappeared, dead, tortured, thrown in a dungeon, and if you're lucky enough to ever get out of that country in one piece, you will be sent off scarpering with your tail between your legs, and you will tell all your friends and your entire nation, and the world just begins to understand you don't go there and fuck around, right? Like, you don't go there with even an I or T not crossed in your temporary tourist application. And when you get there, you behave totally accordingly. We're not talking about, oh, the line in China is that you don't go there and bite a woman's face or feel up a teenager on a bus. Like, we're not saying that that's the threshold. The threshold is way lower than that. The threshold is don't fuck around in the slightest. And if you go to China on a legitimate tourist visa or a temporary working visa, and you abide by not really unreasonable standards, just respect the place where you are, right, and be good, and leave when you're meant to leave, come when you're meant to come, all that. Like, if you do that, you'll be fine. You'll enjoy the fruits of this country. You'll have a great time. You'll have fun. You won't be disturbed. The authorities won't be all over you. And you'll have a good time. And you'll go home and totally unscathed, happy, no bother in the world. But if you fuck around, you're going to find out. Like, and it got me thinking about, like, why does that matter? Like, at a state level, you think, okay, that's the way one state operates, and then another state is liberal, democratic, and kind of gay or whatever. But it cuts really to the core of it, is that you can accuse me of stating obvious things here, but it's still worth doing, is that an average woman who's walking down a darkly or a poorly lit street in China, she, generally speaking, doesn't get pounced on and her face bitten. And a girl on a bus doesn't get felt up by some foreigner, like a young girl, because in China that doesn't happen to them, because their state sets down the marker at the top for the whole world. So some people can come in, but not many people can come in. But of those who do, the stakes are straight out there, and the rest of you know about it. And thus, these things don't happen to Chinese women in the same way. Like, and that's the sort of the connection. It's so sort of, and the point is, with these Indians and this other guy, they are in this system where they're afforded all the rights in the world, all the translators. I've talked about this before. They're given all that, and not a hair on their head is touched, and every possible right in the books is afforded to them by lawyers, NGOs, the rest of it, translators, all of it, courtesy, human rights, Irish civil liberties. None of it afforded to people in Ballyogan. None of it afforded to me speaking online. None of it afforded to, what was it, like, activists being monitored and all that. We don't have any civil rights, but the guy who feels up a girl, or the guy who bites a woman's face in the middle of the night on her way home, as a complete stranger, they have all the civil rights. They probably have extra rights. It's more stringently applied to them, I would imagine. And then when they're given these suspended nonsense sentences, there's no talk of, like, with this 52 syllable name Indian guy here, I don't see anywhere in the articles of the court stuff about him that, well, he's on a suspended sentence, but he's also being shoved on a flight, like, immediately. There's none of that. Like, it's just, well, no, he committed a crime and he's entitled to serve or not serve a sentence and then come out same way in Irish, because, oh, sure, that would be discriminatory or something. But it's like, well, then you're sending a message to the whole world that if you come here and you do any of these things, on a global scale, you're going to get a slap on the wrist. You're going to be treated with complete fairness. You will not at any point have to be afraid, like truly afraid. And you're going to get out and just go about your life. And insofar as you have a taboo because your name was in the paper, you're just part of this Indian community, insular anyway. And, it's not going to matter the same way it would to an Irish person having their name, dragged through the mud or in this case, legitimately. So basically you're grand. Nothing will happen to you. So it just means that every Irish woman is sort of open. There's an open door to every possible predator in the world to have full access to bite their face, to feel up their skirts on a bus. There is 8 billion people, many of whom are complete retrobates, who have an industrial track to come into Ireland and do what they do, and they have no ultimate fear that, well, in the event that I'm caught or the person reports me or whatever, which how many of these situations happen where the report doesn't even go in? The woman just decides to kind of think, God, that was weird. I don't even want to talk about that. So that unfortunately will happen. So there's an open path. It's basically completely unregulated. Like, as far as I'm concerned, the state has these women on a pedestal, generally women or children or vulnerable among us, just not on a pedestal, sorry, just on a platter for any C word in the whole world to just have their way with or abuse, some psycho, some lunatic, some criminal. And it just got me thinking about like where the real border is. The border in China is not so much the airport. People talked about the northern border in Ireland, the North of Ireland, 6-county border, the airport, the checks at the airport. But, the real check, the real muscle of a state to enforce the protection of its people isn't even the border. Yes, there should be checks at the border, the airport, and yes, they should cut off the funds and all that. But the real muscle for the likes of a China or any other proper state in the world that protects its people they protect their people from their own scum. But of course, there's far more potential scum in the whole world than you ever could have in your own country, and far less ability to know who it is and control it. The way these strong states protect their people is by setting out the fuck around and find out template. That's the real thing. Because it's like, in theory, you could have someone go to China and say, I'm going to go to China and I'm going to do the thing that these two stories did, the bus thing and the biting someone's face. Someone just could have it in their head, I'm going to go to China and I'm going to do that because I feel like it. And the difference is not so much the airport checks, because you could somehow pull it off that you get into the country, you don't quite have a record. But the real threat is that, well, if I get in there and I do something like that, I'm going to be dealt with accordingly, because what I'm doing is a grave sin. In a sense, it's worse than a native committing. A native will get their punishment for sure. But if you're an outsider coming, and they deserve it, right? Obviously, I would punish everyone harsh for such things. But if you're going to come in from outside, which is already a gracious thing that you're brought in here, you're given the benefit of the doubt in some fashion, and you're allowed to be here, and then you go and do something like that to one of ours, which again brings it back to tribalism. That's the thing the government think is naff. Oh, there's no ours and theirs. It's just about crime and it's just any crime is bad. It's like, no, there is tribalism. Like, you come in here, we deal with our own harshly. We should anyway. But there's an extra quality to, you came in here and you harmed one of our vulnerable people, a child, be it on Parnell Street or Aisling Murphy or this girl on the bus. A message has to be sent. That's kind of how I view it. Like, you could talk about the various laws and whatever. China, a place like China or Russia or anywhere else, Saudi Arabia, you name it. There's law, and then there's just like, you either change the law to suit you, or they go and do whatever they're doing. Because they're the state, they're the sovereign entity, they ultimately can do what they have to do. You don't necessarily have to make it so that no foreigner can ever come into the country again. You just go, listen, if you come in here, you're committing the most obscene sacrilege ever to come in here and ultimately even throw a piece of litter. But, worse again, like, the worse the worse the crime, the worse the punishment. It should be like there has to be a message sent that like that understanding that I know if I go to China and let's say Saudi Arabia, right? If you go to China, so I keep saying China, if you go to Saudi Arabia and you find a big bottle of vodka and you drink your bottle of vodka and you get totally pissed drunk and you go take a piss on the side of the street and then you like find some like you like chat up some girl and you hook up with her, some like local like woman, and you hook up with you like charm your way into a local woman and you have your way and you do all these things. Like, you know, it's not even this Saudi Arabia's border enforcement that keeps that from happening. It's what's been waiting for you if you do that, right? Like, that's not what you do in another person's country. You do not go to another person's country against their will, first off, which is the illegal immigration aspect of it. And more importantly, when you get there, if you spit in their faces like that, you're in big, big trouble. And so that's why people don't go to Saudi Arabia and get a bottle of vodka and chat up and hook up with some woman they talk to locally, and they don't urinate on the street and all this. They don't just do it because, oh, well, that's illegal. They do it because it's something like you're going to find out if you do that. And that's what just galls me about these two stories, is these guys giving every human right under the books or on the books, and some kind of slap on the wrist, and then just go back about your life in Ireland. What message does that send to the whole world? What kind of bitch state is that? And what kind of serving up of our own women and children on a platter is that to the whole world? That there's this kind of boring level of like bureaucratic processing of this crime as just, you know, trivial almost, just like nothing. It's just like a bit of boring bureaucracy. The judge with the gavel kind of, you know, oh yeah, we're going to give you a sentence, we'll suspend it, and you know, the paper reported a bit, and it's whatever. It's like this kind of perfunctory thing. Where's the passion? Where's the active protection of our people there? It's such a fundamental abrogation, is that the word, of the duty of a nation state. And it's so, and of course I read these two stories to you, but there'll be another 5 tomorrow, right? That's why everybody is protesting in Ballyogan, Newtown, Mount Kennedy, because everyone knows the score. We don't need the statistics because they're not available anyway. We know that there's this frequency out there that, you know, if you have a daughter and she's 16 and she says, I'm going to go for a jog, around the corner, around the block, it's dusk, then I'm going to go down by the kind of stream, the path by the stream, I'm going to go for a jog, you know. And you know, traditionally it was like, oh, if there's a man in a white van, you know, you stay away from it. That was whatever, like, you know, you just keep wide. But now it's like, you don't know what you're going to meet out there. You don't know what guy who's jumping out of a bush to bite you on the face, or what kind of lunatic who, once they're caught, let's say they kill this girl who goes out for a jog, when they're caught, not only will the police be trying to apprehend this guy, figure out who did it and get him, but when they get him, they'll bring him in and he'll say no English, and then they say, who are you? And he'll shrug their shoulders at them, and they like raid wherever dwelling he's living at, and they can't find any real identity at all. Like, they're like, well, okay, like, is it not a state's basic function to be like, to have a system where they have every single person that's in the country, or 99.99, with the exception of some freak occurrence, they know exactly who is in the state at all times, basically. Like, especially digital surveillance, but like, you know, especially with the digital, you know, instead of having to go through paper files, you can just Google it or do their own internal searches. They should be able to know who everyone is in the country, such that insofar as you do have a foreigner, he shows up, he has documents, he's afraid of the state, ultimately afraid of after what he's done, and ultimately you go, well, what's your name? And they go, oh yeah, he's this guy, he's here on a work visa, here's everything about him, here's the story. The fact that someone could kill your family member and then the guards show up and they're just like, we don't know who this guy is, and the fact that that's not just some freak occurrence, that's, I don't know, arguably tens, hundreds of thousands, God knows what, in the country. Like, what kind of situation, and it keeps happening. you know, so it's the unvetted males thing. It's kind of old hat, but you know, I just saw these two things and I had to dwell on how insane it is that our state doesn't do what it's supposed to do at the most basic fundamental level, and what ultimately would happen to me if I went to China and did that. That's actually the norm. That's what should happen ultimately, regardless of laws or piddling European human rights courts. That doesn't matter. You're in someone else's country. You didn't come in legally. You don't have an identity. You don't have a name, and now you've went up and bitten some woman on the face on her way home from work who you didn't know. Like, you know, it's like the way a child, if a child, like, say a child picks up a rock at home, your own child, and they just pick up, and they're old enough to know the difference, and they pick up a rock and they just smash a window through, right? Like, if they did that, if they lost the run of themselves, the moment they do it, they look at you and they should say, "Oh shit! Like I'm in for it now. I'm in big trouble." It'd be like if when they do that, their natural sense of, it's not fear because no, you know, but it's a form of fear of their parents' authority. It's kind of primal. And the reaction, the anger of the heightened reaction. Let's say, not to get into parenting, I'm not saying like describing my parent. I've little kids; they're not at that level yet, right? So I don't know, but you know, it'd be like if when the kid does that, they're kind of sat down, and then their advocate walks into the room, and the advocate says, "Well, we don't know who this child is. He doesn't actually speak English. He has a litany of human rights, and you can't actually really punish him. So we'll just sentence him to 2 days being grounded with 2 days suspended, and he can just go back about his business." You know, I mean, maybe it's a crap analogy, but it's like that guy, like someone who comes into the country illegally like that, and on top of that, then goes and sexually assaults or kills or hurts someone, especially a woman or a child. They should, at the moment they've done that, for whatever reason they did it, they should be thinking, "I'm fucked. I am totally fucked." And ultimately, if they thought that, they wouldn't do it in the first place, and they wouldn't come here. Um, you know, like they would think, I'm sorry for the language, but like they would think I'm totally fucked at the most primal level, like that. Even someone who's half tapped can understand. Like, and if you don't have that, like that's there for China, that's there for Russia, it's there for Saudi Arabia, it's there for the majority of the world. I mean, I'm sure if you did that in any African country, you'd have a necklace thrown around you, whatever. You know, I'm not advocating for necklacing people, right? So that's just a tangent. But like, what I'm saying is a certain level of fear of the state, reprisal for what you've done. That's the norm. What we have is totally bananas, and that's a complete form of tyranny in its own right, you know. And just to just to segue on from the fact that your man was named as West Dublin, massive area, might as well be anonymous, basically, just but for his name. And the Irish were the streets of their housing estates were named, and so we have here 9 people appear outside. This is Ballyogan. 9 people appear in court over. This is like a day ago in court over protest outside a refugee centre in Dublin. So 9 people have appeared in court charged in relation to a heated protest in Dublin on Wednesday night. All 9 have been charged, and get this right, all 9 have been charged with failing to comply with directions given by the Gardaí. What? So basically, like, I've been in these kind of protest situations. The protest is a bit heated, whatever. The guys say, "You're there, you've been there all day, you've been there for days doing a peaceful, harmonious, nice protest." And then the guards say, "Move aside," and you're like, "Oh, well, I've been here the whole time." And then the guards just randomly go into like psycho mode and start like grabbing you, putting you on the floor, and arrest you. So you're going, "Wait, all of a sudden I was just being slightly insolent in a politicized atmosphere." And, you know, 99 times out of, you know, like the vast majority of times, that's just seen as okay, whatever. But now I'm on the floor, handcuffs, I'm in the back of a van, and I'm in court. I'm being denied bail, which they were, or at least initially. And I have my face and name on the paper. I'm being prosecuted. Like, my, you know, criminal record, the rest of it, like for something that in most circumstances would just be whatever. But they can just decide, no, right now it's thoroughly illegal. Because we say so. Think of how many of these people, these leftists, and these kind of Antifa types who take over a house, squat in it, break in, bring a load of migrants in and then like tussle with the guards and refuse to leave and all that, how many of them end up on their face with their wrists being clamped in with handcuffs and coming out of the Garda station the next day with bruises all over them and their name all over the paper, criminal record, initially denied bail, the street and name and address published on the newspaper? Like that, I don't ever hear that happening to people. So, you know, you're reading the story thinking, oh, 9 charged, you know, maybe they got into like fisticuffs with the guards, which, you know, I wouldn't condone, but, you know, you could say, oh, well, given the highly tense atmosphere, maybe they just lost the run of themselves and that happened. And I suppose, like, even though I agree with the political background, I can see why they got prosecuted. You open up an article expecting that, and then you go, wait, no, so it's just kind of vague public order or didn't comply with a direction. You know, like if you're standing there and the guard says, I want you to stand 2 feet over there, and you go, no, I'm standing here, I'm okay, I didn't do anything wrong or whatever. You know, you start mouthing off like that. You can't see a reason why, and you're just kind of saying, you don't have a right to tell me where to stand. Next thing you're in the station, and now you're in the prosecution mill. Like that's what it is here, basically. There's one out of like the 9 of them, there's one that says, so 9 are totally bullshit, and then the other one they've added on, while one man was charged with possessing a blade. Now, I don't know what, maybe he had a blade with the most ruthless intentions or whatever. I don't know, like, but how likely is it that guy was, because you know the way the media and the guards are, how likely is it that he was wearing a pair of Snickers, like work pants, and he had a measuring tape, like a spirit level, and little mini pliers and a few things in his pockets, and one of them is a Stanley blade for work or whatever, and he was just kind of en route from one to the other at the protest? Like, that's likely enough, let's be real. So how harsh are they going to do him for that now? And will we ever know what are the circumstances really of this guy having a Stanley on him? Like, you know, it is a work tool ultimately, but it's just so unjust. Meanwhile, Vimal Karthik Balsubramaniam is strolling around the place, shoving his hand up 14-year-old girls' skirts on a bus, and it's whatever. You're from West Dublin, you'll get out, you won't be deported, no bother. Meanwhile, these guys ultimately were arrested for just standing there. It's unbelievable, but I mean, I should probably start wrapping it up. It's late. Okay, I want to play you this. Just this kind of it's all thematic here. This is Catherine Eager from Newtown Mount Kennedy. So just listen to her story here. She'll describe it, and I will wrap it up soon. But this is unreal. It's shocking.
I'm here to tell my story that the government and the main media have ignored. My home, my family home, is located just beside Trutter House in Newtown Mount Kennedy. In 2003, my sister, Georgina Eager, was horrifically stabbed to death over 29 times. The man who stabbed her was a non-national immigrant who came over from the UK, from India. If you Google this case, you will see the details, but not all. This man had numerous identities. He was a total con artist. He forged and manipulated the UK and Irish systems, forging documents, until he gave himself the title of professor. He even practiced from his own clinic with a plaque on the wall in Walkinstown. He had a bad history. I believe if this man was checked and his history was checked, my sister would be alive today. This story needs to be heard because this immigration system in Ireland is terrible and this government needs to go. We need new laws. We need to be deporting immigrants that don't have documents. We need their history checked. When I found out that the government were bringing in over 100 undocumented illegal immigrants right beside my family home, I then pleaded with them numerous times and told my story numerous times. But they then went ahead and forcefully and brutally attacked this once very quiet small village. We need this immigration to stop. This mass immigration needs to be stopped, and our voices need to be heard.
So yeah, you know, I mean, I could sit here all night and talk about the absurdities of what we're going through right now, but you know, think of how unreal that is. So she's in a house that's, from what I think she said there, is like basically right next to the center. Same thing happened to her 20 years ago. The story of unvetted males, oh, the big, what they would describe as a moral panic or something like that. It's like, no, it literally happened to her. Her sister was murdered. And now you're bringing in potentially the same potential type of scenario by the hundreds across the road from her house. And she lives in effectively like the far flung sort of reaches of Wicklow. It's sort of like if you go up to Newtown, Mount Kennedy, up to where that centre is, it's like small little road. It's quiet. It's like if you move to that area, you are living in effectively the middle of nowhere. It's lovely. It's really beautiful up there. The idea that like this, let's say this happened, I don't know her full story, but let's say this happens to her sister, and let's say it informed part of her, it was part of her, psychology, that when it is she decided to, if she moved to Newtown Mount Kennedy since, let's say, I want to get away from it all. I want to get away from all this craziness in Dublin. I don't want to be like, I'm going to buy a house up here, and you go look at a house, you look at the site, you research the area, and you think, oh yeah, I'm going to buy in on this. I'm going to take a mortgage out. I'm going to spend a fortune, whatever. And I'm going to do a big whole move, and I will be disconnected from everything. I won't have every shop right near me, but I'm choosing to be in a peaceful place where it could never get me out here. You know what I mean? This is Dublin. Dublin has been ravaged. Maybe some small towns or smaller kind of areas like Dundalk, and these places will be, but the answer is to move out, way out. I'll go off out to Newtown Mount Kennedy, and not just Newtown Mount Kennedy, but outside, a decent bit outside of the original town. I'm up a lane, I'm up a road to a left and another right, and up a long, quiet country road. I mean, what could get me here? I can go walking here. This is cool. I am now at peace, and I am in a nice little area. And that's the trade-off. You lose things and you gain things. And then, like something out of a nightmare, this military barracks, among all this consternation, gets forced in by pepper spraying and violent guards across the road from you. And it's now like a military barracks where you have all these fake UGs in there. And not only that, but they're sort of kin. They're people from their countries shaking hands with them and speaking their language, are opening and closing the door as private security type of people with no badges, often wearing balaclavas. They're coming in and out, and then on top of that level of like static security that they have, or like private mysterious security, then on top of that, to give it real muscle, they have guards, monitors, in some cases helicopters. They have your state police are there encircling and inside of it to protect it, like a barracks. Like, think of how much you would be kind of like slapping yourself in the face in the morning thinking, is this real? Is this really happening to me? Like, look around at where we are. I came all the way out here. I bought a house. I set it up. I decorated it. I brought kids into this world, and I set up a dream for myself. A simple, humble, reasonable dream. I want to live in a nice, quiet, safe place in Ireland. I'm willing to put myself out a bit. And then I look across the road, and this thing is here. And I have no say in it. And even though the majority of the country are on my side on it, I still have no say. And this is just what it is now. I have a foreigner-occupied, unvetted male military barracks effectively across the road from me. So when I go out and I pass the beautiful flowers and the robins and the nice birds and go for my little wander in the evening, I have to walk past this barracks looming over me, and all these guys standing outside smoking cigarettes and thinking about where they're going to find jiggy and all. Like, what the fuck is going on? That's where someone like her must be. And then you add her personal history into it as well. Like, that's what makes it so surreal. Also think of whether it's Ballyogan or anywhere, depending on the area, you choose. In our society, the big kind of pact you make with the state, the regime, is kind of your mortgage. You go in on, if you're lucky enough to go in on, let's take, not standard, but like if you're doing kind of well for yourself, if you've, you went to college or you did a trade and you did very well, you did everything right, you're able to take out a $500,000 odd mortgage. And so you look around selectively and you pick a nice place and you have your family, your kids, or the kids that you're going to have in mind. which is the most precious thing. You think, I want a place where they can grow up nicely. I want a place with a nice cafe, a nice playground, good people, all that. And I'm going to go in on my half odd million. Could be more, could be less, a lot of money. And then I'm going to pay, what is it, like 30% or whatever it is back on that again to a bank on top of it. And it's an already inflated house cost because of all this state policy and migration. I'm basically going to completely have to prostrate myself for my entire life just to have a house in a, not a palace, just a safe home, comfortable home in a place where there's no red carpet rolled out for me, but just, it's kind of like what I grew up in. Your kids can play soccer. The neighbors are kind of nice. They're reasonable. If a wallet gets lost on that street, you know, you don't have to assume that it's gone. You can think, maybe it's going to be left somewhere for me, or maybe someone will keep it for me and they'll put it in the WhatsApp group, and it's going to be a nice place, you know, and everyone knows everyone. That's all you want, and you basically give your entire life blood to it, just for your kids to have a nice upbringing. And you've done your end. You went to college, you did a trade, you busted your balls, you took shit from your boss, you name it. You pulled it out of the bag, you did everything right. And while everything crumbles around you, the state has no interest in you and all this. You do everything right, and you have to give. What you have to give in the price of a house and the price of a mortgage is way more than you should ever have to give just to have this place to live where it's safe, comfortable, and secure and pleasant. You have to give way over the odds than you ever should have had to give. But you do it. And then wherever the community is, it's all good. And then next day, the buses are arriving. The centre is up 40 feet away from your house, across in some abandoned old HSE building or something. And next thing, you're busing in 6 huge coach loads, and the lads are there. They're all lads. They're all Somalian, Syrian, whatever. They're all about 26. They're all cocky. You know, no one knows their background. It's like an army, a completely hostile, alien foreign army, and it's surrounded by guards, and you're going to get battered if you oppose it, or fired from the job that you have to pay for this mortgage. Like, the level of injustice that's involved here, maybe I'm repeating myself, I talk about this a lot, but it's unfathomable, you know. And so it goes back to maybe some of the theme I spoke about at the start, which is that, you know, eventually everyone buys into this. It's not just some working class people who are, you know, like activists. They're half activists and they have to give a fuck and they're wild men and all this. Now it's going to be all your middle classes, your, you know, the Pilates crew, the whatever. It's going to be the elites. It's going to be like in Germany, the sweater vest, you know, resort holiday yuppie people singing "Foreigners Out," Germany for the Germans. Like, it's all in now. So I don't know. I have so many tabs. Like, I'm going to leave it there. Anything else can wait for a different night. But it's so open for progress, you know. So I look at where we are, and sometimes the centres go in, like in Ballyogan and all of that. But the sort of, if you think about it, and I'll carefully parse my words here, if you think about it as a form of, I'm not going to say warfare, but as a full spectrum sort of I don't know, you know, like an opposite, you know, there's a lot of NGOs watching me here, they'll misinterpret something, but as a full spectrum differing of interests between the regime and the people, that's the way it has to be kind of thought of, which is full spectrum, which is like you're doing the centers thing, but you're also looking at the online game, but you're also looking at the cracking of the resolve, because what you have to do is diagnose the points of contact. So if you look at Braveheart or something, there's like the two armies coming together like that, but then the other ones have figured out a way of coming around from the side and deceiving people about having lower numbers, but then having higher numbers, and arrows, you know, and like you know what I mean, some sort of medieval battle where there's all these little tricks you can pull out, and you exploit the weaknesses, and you exploit the little the vulnerable points and all of that. So you don't just kind of run into battle, you think about the structural integrity of your opponent, and you think about your own structural integrity and where these points are. And of course, unlike a medieval battle, This is actually far, far more complicated. A lot of it is rhetorical, spiritual, political, psychological, economic. It's all that. So there's so much there that has to be thought about, that while you're having this argy-bargy at a centre like Ballyogan, you have to be thinking about where the sort of the defecting, nominally left-wing influencers and celebrities are at. You have to be thinking about how they're looking at it and what they must be thinking. You have to be thinking about the big kingpins like Conor McGregor. Where's he at? What's going on with him, at least from a distance? What are his options? Where is he at? Where are the guards at? Etc. Right? Think about the guards a bit. Think about outside forces. Think about the EU. Think about what happens as we go forward. Think about all of it, and you have to be trying to zoom out and plan ahead. And again, even if you don't know all the answers or how things will go, which one of us does, you are thinking about how to basically maximize where we're at in as many diverse ways as possible. I'm speaking figuratively, starting as many fires, figurative. We're talking about concepts, starting as many problems as possible for them to have to put out, thinking about what sort of bandwidth and resource and capacity they could possibly have. Think about the decentralization and asymmetrical nature of where we're coming at, and try to completely undermine and degrade their capacity across the board, all at once, running at them, coming up from underground, coming in from the sky, coming in from all dimensions at all times, constantly changing, constantly developing, and then forcing them in their sort of retreat and their being sort of overwhelmed in certain ways and lacking the creativity and capacity, that they start acting out in the wrong ways under the pressure. And then you are foreseeing all of that as much as is possible, and basically gaming it all out in your mind. Like, that's the kind of level that it has to be at under the circumstances, and everything in a sense is in our favor. The truth, justice, everything, the masses increasingly across the board are all coming. And my point is that if the masses, if you see that, okay, well, we're getting some upper class people, we're getting some middle class people, we're getting some celebrity defectors. So while Ballyogan's going on and that's all obvious, you're sort of thinking how best to exploit, if these phenomena are occurring anyway, if they're occurring by themselves, you don't want them to just occur to the extent that they're going to occur and sort of rudderless. You want to actually recognize it as it's happening and best exploit it for its full potential as it's happening. Ideally, even before it happens, you should be potentially reading it and considering it, like chess or anything like that, and then maximizing it and the rest of it. So again, it's this full spectrum thing. And if everybody's doing that and everybody's running at it in such a fashion, then eventually the regime's capacity to keep up with it starts to break down, and ultimately that's all we can do. And there's a lot of potential there for that. So I hope I haven't I hope anyone doesn't misinterpret me falsely there, and some sort of get me wrong. I'm talking about peaceful protest, community awareness raising, and the rest of it. And obviously condemn all illegal activity and support peaceful political change and a robust discourse in the free and open marketplace of ideas. Obviously, I'm just talking about concepts and rhetorical sort of rhetorical opposition and just competing ideas, basically, is what I'm talking about. So yeah, I'll leave it there, lads. I don't, probably not many super chats at all there, but one of those nights I'm just kind of, it's not a big subject, I'm going off in a million different directions, and but I'm happy to read them all the same, and I appreciate it. So
I'm here to tell my story that the government and the main media have ignored.
Yeah, we did hear that already, powerful as it was. So James Anto Ward, €6 super sticker, thanks very much. Armchair McNationalist, €5 super chat, thanks very much, appreciate it. So like I said before, people have been very generous and very supportive, and it has, and especially on kind of like how do I get these things off? I want to get this off the screen. There we go. Yeah, people have been very supportive, and it's sort of there's nights where I'm kind of blown away by like the support, and it's usually these big nights where there's big subjects and everybody's into it. So generally speaking, I'm very appreciative of it, and what it does allow me to do is sort of I would always stream, but what it does allow is for like, let's say 4 nights a week, which is a lot because it's actually tiring, and it's sort of, you need to look into some stuff and get everything together and all that. So it does it is a bit of a thing. But if it wasn't for the support, and this isn't like moral blackmail or whatever, this is just me giving my appreciation. So thanks. But it's like it would just be this kind of like a stream a week, maybe even less or something like that. Because if I were from my family life and from my personal life, sort of 4 maybe plus nights a week, being like, oh, let me disappear off here for largely like an entire evening, because you spend hours thinking about stuff, kind of dwelling, scrolling, then you get stuff together. Depending on the night, this was a bit of an easier night. But you wouldn't, it's just human nature. You wouldn't be doing that if you weren't thinking, well, there's also, like, as well as liking doing it and all that, there's a justification, it comes with back and forth. So it really does, like, when people say, oh, it makes it possible and support the channel and stuff, it actually literally does. And so I appreciate it massively. So with that said, I'm going to leave it there for tonight. We'll see what happens. As always, Notes from an Occupied Nation will continue, and I'm sure within about 2 days there's going to be some massive drama and massive new events and stuff going on. So so to the YouTube audience who I'm paying attention to, thank you very much. To the Twitter audience, I don't really pay attention to that, but I don't know if it's as big a platform, but I assume some people watch there. So thanks for you as well. Just a last minute there, Sheepdog €2 says, thanks, Gerald. Appreciate it, man or woman. I don't want to misgender you, Sheepdog. Thank you very much. So yeah, everybody, take care of yourselves. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday midnight and the rest of your weekend. So take care. Ihawa. See you.